Hi guys. Chapter 12 of My Teacher Fried My Brains by Bruce Coville. It's the second book in the My Teacher is an Alien series. Chapter 12 is called Accused. So if you weren't here last time, what are you doing here? Go back and watch chapter 11. But anyways, just a quick recap. He went to Andromeda Jones' classroom and went in and fried his brains because he wanted to get smarter. He found the glowing slug thing. He called it Poot because it only says Poot. And he was leaving the school when a car pulled up and somebody said, "Get in, Duncan." So we're probably going to figure out who that is in this chapter. Okay. Chapter 12, Accused. Once my heart started to beat again, I realized that I knew the person driving the car. It was Peter Thompson's father. "Get in," said Mr. Thompson again. "I'll give you a ride home." I hesitated, not because I didn't trust Mr. Thompson. I just didn't want to hear him whine on about how much he missed Peter now that he was gone. On the other hand, I was tired and hungry, and getting a ride home instead of having to walk was very appealing. I decided I could listen to Mr. Thompson for a few minutes if it meant getting to my house and my refrigerator faster. Actually, it was the refrigerator that was topmost in my mind. I was hoping I could find something in there that I could eat without having to worry about whether or not it was still alive. Of course, there was no guarantee on that matter. My father calls our refrigerator Resurrection City because my mother puts in stuff that's dead and 3 months later takes it out covered with new life. Whenever my dad says that, my mother replies, "Look, Harold, if you don't like it, you can clean the refrigerator yourself. Since last time I looked, you didn't have 2 broken arms, though you might if you don't watch out." Dang. Life at my house is not exactly like life on Leave It to Beaver. So what are you doing out this time of night? I said as I climbed into the car. The instant I said it, I realized what a dumb question it was for a kid to ask an adult at 2 o'clock in the morning on a school night. But then I've noticed that for most people, their tongue is the last part of their body to get smart. I wished I hadn't asked. I wished it even more when Mr. Thompson answered, because depending on how I took it, what he said was either terribly sad or as scary as anything that had happened so far that night. But I had asked, and Mr. Thompson answered. "I'm looking for Peter," he said. I closed my eyes. Even though my tongue was running ahead of my brain, I was smart enough to know that "Grow up, Jack, your kid took off for outer space because he couldn't stand you" was not the right thing to say under the circumstances. Actually, I could think of several things that were not the right thing to say under the circumstances. What I couldn't come up with was anything that I should say, so I kept my mouth shut, which was probably the best proof I had so far that the brain fire was making me smarter. "I know he's around here somewhere," said Mr. Thompson as he began to drive. I just don't believe he's gone that far away. He's too smart to think he could survive someplace like New York City, even though he always wanted to live there." This was sad. Mr. Thompson's idea of far away was several trillion miles short of where his kid had really gone. Do you know where he is, Duncan?" asked Mr. Thompson. "I know you were his best friend because you were the only one who ever stayed overnight at the house. He must have told you where he was going. Tell me, please tell me." A car passed us, going in the other direction. In the glow of its headlights, I could see that Mr. Thompson had tears running down his cheeks. "Peter didn't like me as much as you think he did," I said truthfully, which was sort of a new experience. "He only let me stay at your place because I was in trouble." Mr. Thompson nodded. "Peter would have done that," he said. "He's a good boy." I felt like asking Mr. Thompson if he had ever bothered to tell Peter he thought he was a good kid while he was still around. I decided it wasn't the time. I really didn't like seeing him so sad, So when he stopped the car in front of the house, I said, Listen, if I hear from Peter, I'll be sure to let you know." "Thanks, Duncan," said Mr. Thompson. "You're a good boy, too." I swallowed. My throat started to hurt. I don't know why for sure, except that no one had ever said that to me before. When I went inside, everyone was asleep except Patrick, who was sitting up watching an old movie. "Ma's mad 'cause you didn't call," he said. I nodded. She always said she was mad when Patrick didn't show up too, but usually she was just relieved. I went upstairs and got into bed, but I didn't go to sleep. I mostly stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out the answers to questions I had never asked before. I got so smart. If I didn't know how to take Mr. Thompson, my teachers began having the same problem with me. It started 2 days after I gave myself the second dose of the brain zapper. Mr. Black, the math teacher, called me in at lunchtime and said, "Mr. Dougal, I'm going to give you one chance to confess. Otherwise, you will be going straight to the principal's office." I looked at him. "Confess for what?" I asked. He glared at me. "Mr. Dougal, I cannot abide cheating. I want to know how you passed the math test I gave you yesterday afternoon." Sheesh. What am I going to tell him? That I passed it because I had gotten my brain fried and I was probably smarter than he was? I was smart enough to know that was a bad idea, even if I hadn't been smart enough to realize that suddenly passing a test was going to get me into trouble. I closed my eyes and thought fast. "I'm turning a new leaf," I said, trying to sound sincere. "I've really studied for that test." Actually, that was a lie. I had barely studied at all. I didn't need to. My brain had just absorbed the information. From the look on his face, Mr. Black might have found the fried brain story more believable. "I want the truth," he said. "Mr. Black, I didn't cheat, and I can prove it. Give me some more questions right now, and I'll do them for you. You'll see. I really know the stuff I do." Mr. Black smiled as if he knew I had really gotten in over my head. "All right," he said. "Have a seat." I sat down in the first row. Mr. Black went to his desk and took out a sheet of paper and a pencil. He scribbled down a few numbers, then brought the paper over and set it in front of me. I wanted to kick him. The problem he had written down was harder than anything on the test. He wanted me to get it wrong. Brain, I thought. Don't fail me now. That's the end of chapter 12. Make sure to like and subscribe. Put book suggestions in the comments. I'm going to say this every time. I need books to read after I finish these. And whichever book request gets requested or has the most likes, then I'll do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Chapter 13 should be coming out soon, but we'll see what happens.